Um, I'd like to, as I say, thank you all for joining this Keeping Learners Safe Online webinar. And just to add a little bit of context, I'd just like to talk briefly about a Newsbeat survey that was conducted 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this involved 15 to 18-year-olds. And rather surprisingly, it actually published the fact that 15 to 18-year-olds, 25% of 15 to 18-year-olds are actually happier online than they are in real life. And 1/3 have met someone in person they've originally met through social media. Now, obviously, that's a growing concern for society in general, but certainly for ourselves as educators. And I think it's our role as educators to educate and inform our learners about the rights and wrongs of operating in an online environment. And actually, Dr. Emma Short, a psychologist at the University of Bedfordshire, said that the number of teenagers meeting up with people they first befriended online is worrying. She actually said, although we create and maintain our friendships online in a very real way, it's not safe to assume that strangers we meet online are anything other than strangers. When you're 15 and you're very effective at identifying friends and risk, it's easy to assume that you can do that online. It's not safe in that they may not be who they say they are, and you know nothing about them apart from the conversation you've had online, which is a very small part of their lives and the person they may be. So that's just setting a bit of context to the session today, to recognise that lots of the learners that we deal with on a day-to-day basis do actually perceive an online lifestyle as actually more prevalent than a real-life lifestyle, and that in itself is worrying. So we have a number of presenters today who are going to share their experiences of keeping learners safe online. That includes Peterborough Regional College, where they've used the Southwest Grid for Learning 360-degree self-review tool to help evaluate their college's e-safety policy and practice. The tool also suggests how the college might do more to protect young people and staff. We have representation from GIST Legal, who will discuss some of the main legal risks of social media. They'll offer guidance on best practice to ensure legal issues don't get in the way of the innovative and creative use of these tools. And a colleague from Loughborough College who developed an e-safety course in Moodle, and over 500 students have completed the course in its first month, and today over 30 colleges have downloaded the course for their own students. So lots to look forward to. From your own perspective as participant today, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and share experience in the question and answer panel at the end of the presentations, which will include case study presenters and representatives from the GISC advisory services. You'll also learn about some of the current challenges around keeping learners safe online, and you'll find out hopefully about where to find support from the advisory services within GISC. As Malcolm mentioned previously, please ask questions in the chat pane, and do have a look for links that may be dropped in from time to time, because the presentation window doesn't have active links, and if there are any links that are mentioned, they'll appear in the chat pane for you to follow. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to Katie McAllister, who's a student wellbeing and enrichment manager at Peterborough Regional College. She's also a member of the safeguarding team and the lead for e-safety, working closely with the local police and other agencies and organisations to best support our students and staff. So it's over to Katie.
Thank you very much. Can I just check everybody can hear me okay? So if you either want to do a thumbs up or a yes just in the chat area, that'd be much appreciated. Ah, bless you. Thank you very much. And in honour of this being my first public chat, I've developed a full-blown cold, so I don't promise you I sound this nasally normally. I wanted to go through just to give you an idea, being in a college or an education environment, over the tools that you could use that would help you review your products that you've got within the college. And the reason we did this is we started as a college just looking at the age group we currently have, they've often missed a lot of the e-safety training that the schools, primary and secondary, are now doing. So hopefully in the next few years, we won't need to do as much as we're having to do now because there is a far greater awareness with our students. But we definitely have a group that have missed some information. We also had a group of staff that really weren't aware of all the new technology that was coming through, or were quite nervous about using it. We also recognised Ofsted was going to come in and say, what are you doing for your staff, what are you doing for your students, but also what are you doing for the wider community, our contractors, etc. And the final part for us was, could we be open to litigation, or could there be any financial abuse in this that we needed to be aware of? And I can just see somebody's asked, can we get a copy of the presentations? And I'm sure that that will be available to you all after. So what we then did was sit there and thought, right, really what are our challenges? And within Peterborough Regional College, like there are for many of the colleges right now, we have seen an increase in the child sexual exploitation. We'd also monitored through a system that we use called Intuition to see how much harassment, bullying, etc. was happening. And we could see an increase in particular with Facebook. We could work out which departments it was coming from. But what we weren't then doing is really doing much about it apart from following our own general disciplinary process. We were also getting concerned working with our IT departments over were we making sure that we'd followed all our legal and statutory duties. And I wanted to find out for us, were we keeping everybody safe that we needed to? We didn't know what we didn't know. So could we go across college? Could we check what our hosting liabilities were, our data protection? And in order to do this, we needed to come up with a very easy-to-use and comprehensive action plan, and I just had nowhere to start. So that's where we found a product that was called 360. And if you'd like to make a note of it, and I'll pop it in the chat at the end, but the website is www.360, as in the numeric value, 360safe.org.uk. But if you Google 360 safeguarding or safe, it will come up. Now what you have here is a very user-friendly and a very easy process, but what I loved, especially in the current climate, was that it was free to access. So that you can go in, and even if you decide not to go for the kite mark, you can still use this tool to review what you're going through as a college, and it takes a whole college approach. And it definitely covered stuff that we would not have even considered. So what you've got in there is top line information, then it goes into detail, and then it will actually give you ideas of what are your areas for improvement, what best practices are out there, and also what could you do as evidence to prove that you're definitely doing it. Because it's one thing to think, yeah, I think we are, but actually when you sit back and you really look at your detail, is it all there? What I really like with this product is they've worked very closely with a lot of schools. We were the first college that got this award. So there weren't many colleges that we could go back to. But within the schools, they then collected all of the best practices that were out there nationally. So you really got a feel for what's a benchmark that we could use. To give you an example of what this format looks like, what you would have is there's 4 main elements. And then within each element, there are strands. And within each strand, there are then aspects. So for example, the first one, which is policy and leadership, one of the strands is responsibilities. But within that, you then end up looking at your e-safety group, what your governors are doing, what your student union are doing. So it really breaks down whose responsibility you need to think about across the college. Strand 2 of that then looked at policies, and it went much wider than I think we'd probably given it credit for. So we were looking at things like our policy development, did it have all the right scope, had we got acceptable use evaluations in there, what sanctions had we got for if anybody wasn't following the college guidelines for staff and students and our contractors. Strand 3 within this looked at communication. And again, it went slightly wider than we were thinking about. So we've got things like checking how students and staff use devices, our social media use, the use of images, online communication, and professional standards. And what we had to remember was it was our professional standards, not only of our staff, but what we were getting our students used to, and also how we were going to move forward with our contractors and with the wider community. So from following this, it probably took us a good two, 3 months to make sure we'd got all the evidence and everything going in place. But you can work at your own pace. But the impact has already been seen. So for us personally, we've been able to see that our information has really improved for our parents and students and our contractors. There are certain expectations we now have our contractors to expect to abide by. We know our apprenticeships are much safer from an e-safety point of view. It also went wider than e-safety. It did look at safeguarding, which was very useful as well, because it just made sure it tied it all together. It allowed us to pull together our training, made sure our governors were up to date. It made sure that our staff were very aware of CEOP and that our students were being trained on CEOP and how to use the VLE. Made sure our monitoring was in place and was appropriate. But I think overall, it just forced us to look at our wider audience and took a college-wide approach, which I think with safeguarding generally we all do. But in the current climate, everybody's so busy, and it really brought this to the foreground. What we've had is from an impact as well is we've now ensured that we've got a detailed action plan that is tied in with college-wide action plans. And we've used the format that was provided to help us improve our other action plans because it did go so wide. For a college from a personal point of view, to be the first college with the kite mark was a great success. But it's also allowed us to go out and sort of help other people develop this, and we would be happy to do that. So if it's something that you're interested in.
Hi, can I just point out somebody's got their talk button on, and there's a conversation going on over our speaker at the moment. So could you just check that you're not actually speaking? Sorry about that. I'll go back to Katie.
Thank you. That's all right. Obviously, I was getting a bit boring and a bit worrying for everyone. So I think for us, we just made sure in particular we now have a specialist e-safety officer that comes through, but the staff confidence has improved, and we've seen even staff come to us going, this has nothing to do with college, but in my personal life, I've noticed this. You know, it's really brought it to the forefront of everybody's thought, and I think in particular we have a lot of parents that work for us, and I love the fact that they feel confident enough to go back and work with their own children. So I'm loving the comments I've just put in chat. You just boosted my ego, so thank you. Just a couple of future plans that we're personally going to take forward. Areas that I recognised that we weren't doing was probably embedding the students enough in actually this action plan. So although we had our student union involved, what we'd like to really develop now is things like our ICT students. They do all the teacher training for the staff, so they come in and they teach our staff on what's going on now with Facebook, you know, what's going on with new chat lines that are coming through. So it's much more about being a student-led product, but it's students that are really highlighting where the use is. In another area, it's improved our welfare, and we'd like to take it further and use the structure of the tool to improve how we look at all of our other student services. Sam, can you just clarify what you mean by that question, and then I can help answer that one. What we've just done on the next part is I've just given you some ideas of what we've got around the college. So we've got a couple of posters, we've got VLE, we've got PRC notices and magazines. We're also doing a number of events. So there's a whole mix of ways, because we're very aware that there isn't enough ways that we can get this information out. I think for us the best one has been providing the technology for staff to come and just play with, and then we also use the same technology and we tested our students and saw where their Facebook accounts locked down as they should be. So if Sam's able to clarify, let me just read her question.
Katie,
Yeah,
we're going to come back to the questions at the end because we are tight for time. So the questions are going to be taken account of and then going to be referred at the end in the panel session if that's okay. But thanks very much indeed for your presentation, and far from boring, it was absolutely excellent. And I've seen that there's a number of people have been tweeting. Just for everybody to note that the hashtag is SID 2015. SID, Safer Internet Day 2015. If you want to share the information from the speakers today on Twitter. But as I say, thank you very much, Kate. That's really useful. I'm sure there will be lots of questions for you at the panel session shortly. So I'd now like to introduce Jackie Milne, who's from Just Legal. She's an information specialist at Just Legal and has a particular interest in e-safety and social media, mobile learning and information rights. After qualifying in law, she began a teaching career and managed various leadership roles across schools in central Scotland. Jackie now supports and works with FE and H institutions and delivers online and face-to-face workshops and training. So it's over to Jackie.
Thanks, Paul. Wow, that was a bit of a mouthful. Can everyone let me know they can hear me okay? With a little green tick. Okay, that looks good. Right, we'll just move on. I'm going to speak with you this morning on e-safety and social media in this rather broad and kind of murky at times legal context. So please bear that in mind. We've got 10 minutes to go through this complex area, so we'll try and get through that. And then, as Paul said, I'll be part of the panel discussion at the end for questions. How you view social media in a lot of cases will be down to opinion, and we'll come back to this word opinion because that's quite crucial in terms of legal consequences and use of social media. Sometimes that opinion can be coloured by experience, by what's in the press and so on. And probably the kind of most relevant quote for us is the third one along by Chloe Madley. And if you've been following that at all, you'll know that Chloe Madley received a torrent of online abuse after she defended her mother Judy Finnegan's comments on the Ched Evans rape case. Ched Evans was found guilty of rape, served his time, and then, as we all know, then wanted to, or is trying to get back into his career, and she commented that the rape was non-violent and didn't cause bodily harm, and that resulted in a lot of online abuse. Her daughter then defended her, and she then received even, I suppose, more serious threats, including threats of rape and all sorts of awful things. So really key to all of this is going back to that word opinion. We're all entitled to a personal opinion, no matter if it's unpopular. That doesn't matter if it's even in bad taste. It's not going to result in strong legal consequences. But when that opinion becomes unlawful, it breaches legislation, or it becomes criminal, that's when we get ourselves into a bit of trouble. It's not a storm in a teacup. It's, as I've mentioned, there are real consequences, and I would say that, I mean, what I'm reading a lot of is some of the surveys carried out of young people, 18 to 24-year-olds in that bracket aren't really aware of the risks of using social media, and they aren't aware, for example, if they put an unsubstantiated rumour on Twitter, they're not aware that can cause, for example, an action of defamation. And I would imagine that with even younger learners, that's probably a higher figure, much less awareness. So it's important that we get up to date with the law. There's individual responsibility and liability when you put things on social media. You can obviously, it can result in disciplinary proceedings. It can result in you losing your job in some cases. Colleges can also, as Katie mentioned, there's certain liabilities they need to be aware of. In the context of social media, that's really about whether something's posted on behalf of the college, or perhaps it's viewed as endorsed by the college. That can cause problems for them as well. But probably the highest risk is going to be on a reputational basis, or if you like, the most common risk is a reputational one. So it's important that we're up to date with this. The comment on the bottom right, we don't need any new social media laws. That was these are headlines that I've written via our news, and that related to John Cooper QC, a leading barrister who deals with media law. And there seemed to be a kind of legal view that actually all of this stuff is dealt with already. We've got legislation that covers it. We don't need any new laws. The fact that it takes place online doesn't really matter. The government, if you've been following Chris Grayling's amendment to a bill going through the House of Lords at the moment, the government are obviously trying to react to public outrage and so on. There's been a bit of an outcry. Really, particularly these internet trolls need to be managed. There needs to be more consequences for them. So this was his law to combat so-called revenge porn. So that's going through, and that's likely to go through. And what that does is it quadruples the current maximum 6-month term to 2 years in prison if found guilty. And the new measures also give police more time to collect evidence to enable successful prosecutions, and of course that is important because more than, or at least half of frontline police work is relating to social media in some way. So it's not a storm in a teacup, it's something that we need to be aware of. It's important to establish which legal duties that we have. So, as Malcolm mentioned, I'm going to try and use this little tool on the left of the whiteboard. There's a cursor and then there's a wee smiley face. And what I'd like you to do is click the wee smiley face or another of the icons, and then click on one of these boxes, and hopefully this is going to work. Which legal duties do you think are applicable? So if you click the little icon and put it on the box you think's the right answer. Yeah, it's always a bit of a giveaway, isn't it, all of these? Yeah, absolutely right. We know there are statutory legal duties. These are contained in legislation. You know, we could talk about moral duty, we could talk about funding. Katie's mentioned consequences by the inspectorate. But yeah, in terms of legal duties, we've got legislation that deals with offensive communications, obscene publications, harassment, defamation, etc., etc., etc. As I said, there's an awful lot of legal issues to consider. There's also the contractual duty that you will have as members or employees of your college via your contract of employment. The common law duty of care will apply. Colleges need to be aware of that. That applies to learners and staff, and that's about taking steps to prevent reasonably foreseeable harms, and that's going to be higher, that duty will be higher if you're dealing with younger or more vulnerable learners, so bear that in mind. So of course, yes, the right answer is all of these. Okay, things to do. I said this was a very quick run through. Now, assuming you, in some cases you may not be at this stage, but I'm sure that the fact that you've come along to this webinar, you're well on your way to addressing e-safety. And as we know, a lot of issues take place via social media. So assuming you have a clear strategy, you've decided how it's going to be used, thinking about risk appetite and so on, because of course some colleges will be very hands-off and some will be more risk-averse and want to control what's being put out there, particularly if it's via a college Twitter account or Facebook account and so on. Also, assuming someone's responsible for social media use, colleges must have, if there's one thing you take away from this, you must have policy, procedures, guidelines, however you want to articulate that. You must address this in some form, and it may be you have a separate social media policy, it may be it's part of e-safety, email policies, acceptable use and so on, but it needs to be addressed, and that's really important for colleges to know, because if something goes wrong, that may help minimise risk. So you know, somebody's mentioned already about e-safety policies. If you want any information or you want a template on how to do that, then please look at Just Legal's website. So, what are you going to do now? Again, let's have a go at the wee icon. Now, I don't know who's saying what, so really, it's up to you. If you're congratulating everyone, then that's great. Well done. However, don't get complacent. Technology and usage is changing all the time. We know there's been different software that's caused a lot of problems, different apps, different social media platforms and so on. So keep things under review. If you're updating policies and procedures, great, that's good news. Even if it's going along and starting a conversation with someone, that's a significant step to take. But I hope that nobody's going to click pointing at someone else. So can you do that now, if you can let everyone know or your thoughts? Okay, there are a few people who are even congratulating themselves, so well done. Good for you. As I said, updating things is always good news. It's always a good thing to do. It refreshes everyone. You might have further training and so on, so it just keeps everyone up to date. Or starting a conversation, as I said, is a really good step. Okay, and just to finish quickly, these are some of our resources. I think Julia has put these in the chat pane. We've specific resources on social media. We have a policy. It's a good idea to undertake a separate policy. I always say that because it gets people thinking about the issues again. It keeps it current. So we have, if you like, a social media policy that you can adapt for your institution. It's an easy one that you can use and change to suit, because obviously that was going to change depending on the institution. We've got a checklist. It's a very quick checklist for staff, and we've got 4 top tips, so not even that many. And if you want to look at Just Legal's resources, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Another great presentation. Lots of things I'm sure for participants to be thinking about there, not least their next steps. And again, I'm sure the links there will be dropped into the chat pane, so they'll become active for people to visit. Just moving on now to our next speaker, and just a reminder again to drop your questions into the chat pane, so we can ask the questions at the panel session after Rachel Challen, who is the e-learning manager at Loughborough College, and is coming into the FE sector. Since coming into the FE sector, has seen a real need to raise awareness and educate tutors and learners in how to engage in and protect themselves against social media. The course you will see today is the first step on that journey for Rachel and the college. So it's over to Rachel.
Hi, thank you. And as with the other speakers, can I just check that you can all hear me, please? Excellent, excellent. Okay, so can I just say actually how excellent the previous 2 speakers were? I've learned a lot and I've taken loads of notes as I go along, so I think it's excellent so far. So what I'm going to talk to you in the next 8 minutes is about how we've sort of tried to start building a e-safety culture at Loughborough. I don't think it will come as any surprise that our drivers are just the same as Kate is, and that's also underpin everything that Jackie's been saying. So we had anecdotal evidence that there was an increase in online bullying and harassment, and that was just tutors and heads of department coming to us and saying, you know, this is happening, I've had somebody saying this to us, what can we do about it? There is obviously with every college and every institution the increase in bring your own devices, so lots of students bringing their own devices in. We don't actually have social media available on site, which is a bit controversial at the moment, something we're working on, but obviously with your own device you can get onto everything, so we have to make sure that the students are aware of issues surrounding that. We have staff that, you know, aren't fully conversant with social media issues. They're aware that social media exists, but not actually the impact it can have, and actually how they start to work around the issues and address them with students and perhaps solve them with students. And because of that, there was a kind of an inconsistent cross-college approach. So all of those drivers, I mean, there were many more along the lines of, the things that Jackie was mentioning as well, but these were the main ones for us that tutors were coming to us and saying, look, there's a bit of an issue here. And I'll mention it later on, but our ILP doesn't actually class bullying as online or normal bullying, if that's the right way to say it. So everything that we talk about is kind of classed as general at the moment. So they were our drivers. So we knew we had to do something. We decided that online was best, treat online with online. And so the consultation process was that we talked to our learning coaches here who always sat down with the students, kind of knew what the issues were. So we talked to them about what they would like. We then went to some national conferences, some council conferences and information systems, sessions, some other training sessions. Obviously JISC and JISC Legal Site helped us an awful lot with what we should be addressing and looking at. And then we went into development. So we developed this course, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we took it back to the learning coaches because it was really important that it wasn't just something that the e-learning team had developed and sent out and nobody took ownership of it. So the ownership of this course was really important from our learning coaches. So there was a lot of consultation, a lot of backwards and forwards, and making sure actually that what we had provided was what they needed. So the first stage of the development was we developed the course in Moodle. We have Moodle, as do many other colleges. And we used a mixture of Articulate, which is the image you can see on the screen, and also the other tools within Moodle. So it was a mixed way of addressing the course. We thought it was really important, and it was the first time we'd used it here to do Moodle badges. So as the students went through, they could get a bronze badge for completing certain aspects, silver for more, gold obviously for much more. And the initial plan was that the learning coaches would run through it in classes with students. So it wasn't really a mandatory course. It didn't even have to be a solo course to be completed either. It could be either or. We developed the course for level 2 and level 3. So obviously our level 1s needed a bit more support as they went through it, and that's where the learning coaches came in. So from our first stage of development, if you like, we had 584 students complete it. So 502 went through and got the silver badges, and 82 went on and got the gold badges. And that was brilliant. And the feedback from that was really good. Obviously helped us to identify any bugs and all that kind of business as well. But the feedback was that it was really valuable, and it started the talk in the classroom about things that probably hadn't been spoken about before. How do you start a discussion about sextortion or sexting or all of that kind of murky things that you need to start talking about, really. And so the course had about sextortion and sexting, but also about online bullying and how to protect your identity online. So it was kind of trying to look at all aspects and saying, hey, if you're on social media, these are the things that you need to be aware of, and if this is happening to you, this is what you need to do. This is the support we can put in place for you. So throughout the course there was all help, numbers, and where you could get support from. So it was meant to be, like a little holistic. This is what could happen. This is how you help, or we can help you. So that was our stage 1. Because it was so useful and the students were getting so much from it, our stage 2 development then became a mandatory completion. So in our SE student induction, obviously level 2 and level 3, it was a mandatory. You can see on the screen they couldn't get to any of the induction materials unless they'd completed the e-safety part of it. And that was really good, and that's got some really good feedback. And we've also embedded it for staff in our level 3 award in education and teaching training. And the completion rates then from the mandatory completion is we have 2,102 students complete and get the badge from our FE student induction. and 2 halts are completed in the staff training. But also what we do, we've embedded it into our staff all have mandatory training that they have to complete, which is all online, so health and safety and safeguarding and other bits and pieces. So in the safeguarding course, we've also put e-safety content, so the staff are also getting information about what they should be doing from their point of view. So we're trying to address both aspects. We said, oh yeah, anybody can have this, it's no problem. And quite naively we said, yeah, have it, forgetting when we first sent the first things out that it had our contact details all the way through. So a few people were like, can we do that? And we worked quite closely with Stephen Wildman from South Staff to actually make a version that you could put your own contact details in. So it has been quite popular. I mean, that was 40 colleges as of the 31st, that was Friday. I think there's another handful gone out yesterday and Monday. So in the UK, that's we're a bit geeky, we like maps, it makes us happy. So that's in the UK, but actually we've had one in Kazakhstan which makes us laugh. And we've had a look at the unique views on that, and there's quite a few, so there's lots of people looking at it in Kazakhstan, which makes us happy. But that's, I've seen a few people come through and say where we can get the course from. Yeah, well, there's a link. Julie's got the link, and she'll put the link for the blog. They just request it from the blog. We're not releasing it through MoodleNet, but we're doing it through our blog and asking for a bit of feedback. Okay. So what? Why did we do it? You know why we did it. Has it been worthwhile doing it? So we've had a 50% decrease in reported bullying incidents, and as I said, we can't say whether that's online or offline bullying because our ILP doesn't record it in that way. What we can say is that we've taken it in the first 6 weeks of term, so when the FE mandatory induction happened. So although we can't say a direct impact, I would like to think that there is definitely a positive impact with the safety course and so many students going through it and being made aware of different issues, and not just the issues but the implications. So other colleges, so all those colleges that have had it so far, extremely positive feedback on the design. The things that they're using it for are Safer Internet Day, so they're embedding it properly in their Moodle in time for Safer Internet Day. Some people are using it as kind of a design base, so looking how we've designed and structured it and using that as for their own resources, which is absolutely cool, no problem with that at all. And also people are using it as part of their staff development sessions, their CPD staff sessions, so that staff can actually see the other side of it as well. It's often very good to put staff in the role of a student to start to understand and unpick the issues. The next steps is happening today actually. We've got a load of students in. Students' Union have seen this and want to take it further. And we've got a whole load of students at the moment acting out some cyberbullying, which we're videoing, and that'll be, and the learning coaches are running that now, so they've taken ownership of it and they're building up their resources. We'll embed them in the course obviously, and so that's happening. So they're being videoed, there's some kind of role play going on, and I think that's a really powerful voice as well when you've got students actually role playing what can happen to them, and that's a lot more effective sometimes than us just nattering to people. So that was me done.
Okay, thanks very much, Rachel. Again, another excellent presentation, and I can see through the request in the chat page a number of questions for you, but also requests of where they can get it from. And I know that we've now posted the link to the blog in the chat page, so people will be able to nip across there and download this once the webinar is over. So moving on to the next part of the webinar, it's a question and answer panel, and we're joined by all of the speakers, so Katie, Jackie and Rachel, and in addition we've got Jane McKenzie, who's the e-learning advisor from the JISC Regional Support Centre in the South East, David Cornforth, who's a development analyst at JISC Infonet, Jackie Milne, who's Oh, right, that's a repeat, sorry. Jackie, who was one of our speakers, and Alistair McNaught, who's a senior advisor at GIS Techtis. So welcome to all the panel. Thanks very much. I'm now going to go across to the questions that we've had sent in, and I'm going to start with a question to Katie, and it says it's from Sam, and it's: does this maintain respect with staff? If students are teaching teachers, does this still keep a level of respect to the teacher? Katie, can comment on that, please.
Really good question, and yes, actually improved relations, it started conversations, and it also led on to other things, which strangely is just linked to a question I've just seen in chat, because we've then found that the students and staff have then moved into things like prevent, extremism, just things that are going on at home, so it's gone into other safeguarding areas. But it actually allowed the students to feel like they had a responsibility. The other impact was they appreciated how tough it is for a teacher to stand in front of 30 students and teach, because that's what we were expecting them to do. And I think that also helped slightly with the sort of the disciplinary process that sometimes we need to do if the behaviour isn't ideal. If anything, it hasn't damaged relationships, is my summary. It's definitely strengthened them. And what we've also been able to do is bring guest speakers in, and they've also helped the students.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Moving on now to another question. I've got a question from one of our panellists, rather bizarrely, but I'm going to ask Alistair to, he's put in the chat pane, social media equals mob rule. If he wants to come in and explain what he means by that, or ask the question to other panellists, if he could. Are you there, Alistair?
Sorry, I am here, but I was on mute. Yes, this is a really interesting question. I think and you'll notice that it was put as a discussion topic, which I think is a really important discussion. But I think there's particular it has a particular resonance if you're working with students with disabilities, learning disabilities. In particular, people perhaps who are different in one way or another. And one of the things that we're particularly exercised by at GIS Techtis is ensuring that your e-safety policies actually are appropriate to your learners who have, who are different in a variety of ways and are more vulnerable as a result of those differences. So I think it's, there isn't an answer to the question, but what I would encourage people to do is to recognize that within their student population, they'll have about 10% of their learners who have a disability of one kind or another, and that may make it more difficult for them to to fully take on board that e-safety training. It may make them more vulnerable to being bullied. It may, in some cases, make them more likely to be a bully because they don't really understand the social implications of what they're doing. So I've just popped something in the text chat there. We've got a lot of guidance on our website, been put together by specialist colleges and regional support centres. So it's an area to consider in the big picture.
Thanks very much, Alistair. Really important that the policies and procedure are completely inclusive, and I'm sure the resources that you pointed people to there will really help. Now we've got a question now for Jackie, and this is from Sonali. It says, does this apply even if the incidents took place outside the institution? So I think this was about the legal implications of the use of social media.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say anything new. Everyone knows that, what was before the boundary of the college, the physical boundary, doesn't apply anymore in the context of social media. I think the question is more about if it's a remote kind of incident that doesn't maybe link so much with the college, and that's a kind of matter of, that's really a decision to be taken. Sometimes I'm asked about incidents that happen between peers, for example, on their own Facebook accounts and so on. Again, it's a matter of judgment. if you don't deal with certain types of bullying offline, you know, in the kind of physical environment, then it's equally unlikely you're going to deal with it in the college if it happens online. But I would have a note of caution in that, you know, if you do have, I don't know what the person that asked the question, I'm not sure what context they mean, but if we're dealing with peer-to-peer, obviously there is a view that that's likely to lead, or if you like, spill out into the college environment. And if if that would normally trigger your anti-bullying policy and things like that, then obviously you need to apply that in the online world. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. I think, again, it kind of goes back to the point that I raised at the beginning. I think it's really important. I think the number of participants, sort of reaching 140 about now, who are here today, do recognise that they have a role to play in educating young people about the safe use of the online environment. And as you said, you know, it's really important that, I think Rachel said, you know, that they don't have a policy for online bullying. It is bullying, whether it's in real life or online. And I think it's really important that we recognise, just within our general education of learners, we need to raise their awareness of all the different types. Now, moving on to another question, one for Rachel this time. Helen asks, you've mentioned about having no social media on site, and you said you're working on it. What are your plans?
Nagging lots of people, really. No, I mean, there's really valid reasons why we haven't gone down that route yet, but we need to have it on site. We need to be able to tap into the way that students learn, and the way that they interact, and the way that they communicate, and the way that they're happiest. Not all the time, but we need to tap into it, but we also need to make it safe. And so the way forward is using things like the JISC template to create a solid policy, to create some safeguards around what may or may not happen, and to provide case studies. And Richard Booth, actually from Shrewsbury College, I don't know if he's on the webinar, if he is, hi, has provided me with lots of case studies and examples of the work that he's been doing. So it's about building up examples, other people's work, and pulling it all together and saying, actually, this is what we could do. This is the way that our students will be safe. This is the way that our staff can support those students being safe, and putting that forward as a proposal. So that's the way forward.
Thanks very much, Rachel. And now I've got a more of an open question, so directed at either Jane or David, really. Lots of talk about social media. What else should be covered in training and policies? That's from Joy.
Hi, maybe I can answer that question.
Okay, James.
Okay. I think it's worth having a look. I'm just going to put into the chat box a link to, we've got our info kit, which is the JISC info kit, and I'm going to put a link into the chat box which links through to a lot of resources that I've put together specifically for today, but also to that info kit. And within the info kit, it gives lots of information which allows people to find out what they should be doing on a strategic level. I've just put that into the chat box. Also, looking at vision, learning, leadership and culture, standards and policies, legal compliance, supporting staff, things like 7 steps to implementing e-safety. So that's a really, if you go through to those links that I've shared, it's got the info kit on there, as well as lots of other resources that you would find useful. So hopefully that answers that question on what you need to cover.
Thanks, Jane. David, did you want to come in?
Can I just add? Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say also the 360. because it gives guidance over what's been done nationally, you can pick other people's ideas as well. So I think between those two resources, because right at the beginning it feels so overwhelming, just where do you start? And I think those two links will allow you just to go, right, let's just take one bit at a time. And I think my best advice would be start either a safeguarding or an e-safety group within your college, because you're not alone on this, and then you follow what everybody else is able to guide you with as well, because you do need a team, and it needs to include a member of your senior leadership team, and preferably a student or two.
Excellent, thanks Katie. Again, another question, sort of fairly specific but open to people, so it's asking any of the panelists really to come in on this. Does anyone cover extremism in their internet e-safety discussions? And Karen's saying that they've had an anti-terrorism officer who's delivered it and it was fantastic. Any comments from any of the panelists?
I can step in and talk you through what we've done at the regional college. So we've gone with extremism. We do it as an element of e-safety, but we also do it as standalone, because we've looked at things like safe giving, what's going on around the country and nationally, to explain to our students what it means locally and across the world. We've had talks coming from the local police, and if you can make a network meeting with your local police, they are absolutely fabulous. Bringing in your prevent group and your RAP group, they can go through what to do for your staff and for what to do with your students. What's really helpful is often this is free, so you can get all of this free training by contacting your prevent lead, and they will be able to go through all of the different elements for your staff and for your students.
Thanks, Katie. Anybody else from the panel want to come in?
I just wanted to say that this is quite a tricky one to manage for obvious reasons, and also, you know, if you're tackling radicalisation, let's call it, then you need to be aware of your learners' rights. So if those rights are being compromised, for example, you know, you need to have very good reasons if you wanted to prevent learners practicing religion and so on. So you have to be very sensitive about it. And just another point is that, you know, if you do have suspicions, then, you know, don't try and investigate matters on your own. You should be involving the police if that's the case.
Thanks, Jackie. Again, another question here. We've got lots of talk of social media. Does anybody worry or consider discussion forums in Moodle or Blackboard, and what's written in them by learners, and who may have a lot, or do people have monitoring in place for the discussion board? So I suppose I want to direct that to any of the panelists.
If I can maybe come in there, I'll just be very quick. You don't want legal hogging the show. Yeah, we get asked quite a lot about monitoring online environments, and obviously, if you're, you know, I mentioned this reasonable word, and I would suggest that a reasonable step to take is if you're encouraging learners or you're actively, you know, if you're requiring them to take part in these forums, then bear in mind that you should also be monitoring content in some shape or form. Those learners should be signing up to maybe an e-safety rule book, or however you want to phrase it, and there should be procedures in place to deal with if there is inappropriate content up there. And maybe in deciding what tool you want to use, something like Moodle, where presumably you can control content, if that's a likely consequence of setting up that environment, then that's obviously going to be useful.
Thanks, Jackie. Just to bring back in either Katie or Rachel, do you actually use any monitoring at the moment within your environments?
Yeah, we've got a couple of ways of doing that. Just picking up what's just been said, when learners first go on to any of the online systems, they have to click on agreement over what information can and cannot be put onto any of our systems. We also monitor everything that goes through our college Facebook accounts, etc. The part that we don't monitor is private accounts. The only time these will be looked at is if a student comes to us with a complaint about e-safety or bullying, and then we ask for copies to be given to us. But at that point, usually it's handed over to Facebook or the police to actually take it further if it needs to be taken any further.
Thanks, Katie.
I think from our point of view, yes, we have the same kind of things as Katie. As you go into as you sign up for your IT account, do not do this. You agree to your picture being taken, all of that kind of business. But actually, when they're in Moodle, it's very difficult, and we have to rely on monitoring staff and how those forums are set up. And this is where the education for staff comes in. We have to make staff aware of what, how questions should be phrased, keeping an awareness of where the forum could go. But on the other side, you don't want to scare them off from doing the forums because it's a really valuable thing for students to have. So it's a really double-edged sword, really, to actually encourage it to happen, but also encourage them or enable them to be to know and to look and to monitor it themselves.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, we're coming up to the top of the hour, so I'm going to ask one last question of the panel, if that's okay. From a question from Anthony. I think this resonates for a number of people who are probably here today. Our college is very risk averse in this area and has been very strict in restricting social media access for students. How would you convince senior managers that allowing access would not impact on their liability or e-safety risks? Again, open to the panel.
Hi, Paul. I'm not on the panel, but I'm happy to answer this one because we've already added something here to the chat.
Yeah, fine.
Because the approach, the approach really that we've taken with the e-safety group is to stress the need to actually prepare students for what is effectively going to be an increasingly online world. And in the same way as we give them the skills to manage in the world, we should be looking at giving them those sorts of skills. And also the values to underpin the way that they behave online. Now, in some ways, I suppose, if you're very risk averse, this is quite a difficult argument to take on board, but essentially it is about reducing the risk by ensuring that the people involved understand what they're doing online and understand the parameters of how to behave online. So mostly the approach that we've taken with regard to talking to senior managers, and RSC advisors will come out or have been going out to consultations on this for the last couple of years, and our resources also stress that, for example, the info kit. The importance really to engage senior managers with the idea of actually reducing risk by enabling learners and staff to understand the risks and to respond appropriately and to behave appropriately online. So the digital values and digital literacy that we stress generally in our work is what we would suggest would form the approach for senior managers.
Thanks very much, Julia. A great place to finish the webinar today. Thank you very much to all the panelists and especially to our presenters, Katie, Jackie and Rachel. I'm sure everybody who's been a participant today has benefited from all of the resources that have been shared, the information and expertise that is evidently on show. I think to summarise for me, there's been a number of really key presentations made. I think we all agree it's about educating not only the learners but also the staff within our institutions and latterly the senior management teams about the use of learning technologies online, social media and others. I think we need to ensure that we continue the momentum and ensure that we are keeping our learners safe online. And as a point that was just raised in the chat pane just as we finish, we encourage learners to have a positive digital footprint or a digital tattoo as it's referred to these days. Learners will always have the internet and the technology available to them, and the more that they can use it in a positive way, the less risk and the less problems there are likely to be. So again, I'd like to thank all the presenters and the panelists and everybody for attending today. The the presentations and the links will be available along with the recording after the webinar. I appreciate there's a number of people said that they came in late, but all of that information will be made available. Once you close down the webinar, you'll be given a link to an online evaluation. I'd appreciate it if you could complete that, because it really helps us in evaluating the session today. Thanks very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you at another webinar in the future.